Is it actually possible that Yuriorkis Gamboa managed to fight with a ruptured Achilles tendon this weekend? Like most people, when I saw this report, I was extremely skeptical about this actually being possible, and I gotta say, now that we have more information, I'm even more skeptical that there was actually a complete rupture of his Achilles tendon. Welcome back, everyone, to your #1 source for learning about everything related to sports injuries and sports medicine news. In this video, we're going to take a look at what happened this past weekend with the Gamboa versus Davis fight, talking about Gamboa's supposed Achilles tendon rupture and the fact that he was still able to keep fighting. If you're new to my channel and you enjoy learning about this type of content related to different sports injuries, make sure you're subscribed, get those notifications turned on so that you can stay up to date as soon as stuff happens. The bottom line here is I think the wording is what's making this confusing. Do I think it's possible that Gamboa suffered a complete rupture of his Achilles tendon and was still able to perform and function like he did? I'd never say never, but I think it's extremely unlikely. But I do completely accept that he had some injury to his Achilles tendon, just not the complete rupture that people are assuming this was meant to be. When Gamboa was interviewed after the fight with the assistance of an interpreter, the word rupture was used to describe his injury to his Achilles tendon. This afternoon, we got a new update from Gamboa's advisor, Tony Gonzalez, in which he said, quote, "Now we need to let the doctor look at the MRI and see what grade rupture it is and if surgery is needed. There is a rupture, they just don't know how bad it is yet." This is extremely important that he says we need to determine what grade of rupture it is. When we look at the classification system for grading Achilles tendon tears, there's difference between a partial or a complete rupture. According to the Kawada classification, which is a widely accepted criteria for Achilles tendon tears, a type 1 tear is a less than 50% partial rupture. A type 2 is a complete rupture with a gap between the two ruptured ends of less than 3 centimeters. Type 3 is a complete rupture where the gap is 3 to 6 centimeters, and then a type 4 is a complete rupture where the gap is greater than 6 centimeters. So even within this classification, when someone says rupture of the tendon, that doesn't 100% specify if it's a complete rupture or a partial rupture. Of course, naturally, a lot of us interpret the word rupture meaning a complete rupture, but based on the technical way somebody would grade this, rupture doesn't have to mean 100%. I will say, though, in my opinion, it's most appropriate to say tear if it's not a complete rupture, because rupture just brings about too much thought that it's complete. Most of the time you'll hear a doctor say partial tear as opposed to rupture, so typically, yeah, rupture does mean complete, but there are some circumstances where someone might say rupture meaning partial rupture. Let's think next about functionally whether or not it's even possible for someone to keep fighting and do what Gamboa was able to do if they had either a partially torn Achilles tendon or a completely ruptured Achilles tendon. I rewatched this entire fight, and looking specifically at his right leg, it was really hard for me to find clear indication that he would have had a complete Achilles tendon rupture. First off, we're of course familiar with the idea that when someone has an Achilles tendon rupture, there's usually more dramatic of sort of an experience. They feel like they got kicked in the back of the leg, they usually stop, they look back, they fall down. It's usually such a traumatic, sudden occurrence that you can't just kind of get up and continue to fight and continue to walk. Looking at some other historical examples, when Kobe Bryant tore his Achilles tendon, you can see how hampered he is just trying to walk. Same with Kevin Durant last year. He tore his Achilles tendon and he was extremely hampered with his gait. This is one important point to make, however. You can still walk with a completely ruptured Achilles tendon. Most of the time it's going to look funny and be abnormal, especially in the setting of an acute sports-related injury, but you can still functionally take steps and walk with a ruptured tendon. Of course, how altered your gait is going to depend on how complete and severe the tear is. The Achilles tendon allows the calf muscles to perform the majority of what we call our plantar flexion. This is the action where we push off the balls of our feet, jump up in the air, take steps, and propel ourselves forward. But we have some other muscles in the leg that perform a similar function if the Achilles tendon is ruptured. Probably the most important one is the posterior tibialis. This tendon wraps down around the inside of the foot and helps provide some of the support for the arch, but whenever this muscle activates, it also plantar flexes the foot. Similarly, the different toe flexors and foot flexors also provide some component of plantar flexion. So it's not uncommon at all for someone to come in with a ruptured Achilles tendon and still be able to provide somewhat of a little bit of plantar flexion. The part where it's different, though, is while yes, you might be able to walk, you're not going to be able to push up onto your toes. You're not going to be able to explode off of that foot or provide any real functional, meaningful resistance. Going back through this fight, yeah, there are certainly times where it looks like something's bothering him on that right foot or on the right leg, but he still is able to plant and cut and change directions and do a lot of functional movements that I have a really hard time seeing would be possible if someone had a complete rupture of their tendon. But if he had a partial rupture, then these movements would be easier and would be more possible. I just think we would have seen a lot more evidence during the fight if he had a truly complete rupture of his Achilles tendon. We have confirmation now that there was at least a partial rupture, so yeah, I mean, you can see how he was still able to function with at least a partial tear of that tendon. Interestingly too, if you go read the research, there's some estimates that around 25% of Achilles tendon ruptures can actually be missed. Usually though, this is someone who's older, it didn't happen during a sporting event, and they just have sort of had gradual pain, or they come in and see the doctor, they can't identify a specific time where it happened, and then we find out down the road they had an Achilles tendon rupture. So I mean, crazier things have happened. I don't think at all that this is a question of Gamboa being able to tolerate the pain that would have come along with something like this. It's purely thinking about it from a functional standpoint. If you completely cut that tendon, there's no function whatsoever from the gastroc muscle or from the soleus muscle, and so you're going to be significantly hampered, especially when you're going 10 rounds in a professional boxing match. It wouldn't surprise me at all here if what happened is somewhere along the way of talking through an interpreter and describing what happened, the word rupture was used when they really meant sort of partial tearing. Is there still a possibility that it was a complete rupture? Sure. I just think we have to be realistic here, thinking about the functional limitations, and really think that it's probably more likely that it was a partial rupture or a partial tear. Also, again, too, the fact that we saw this updated report where they're specifically talking about the grade of the rupture implies to me that it might not be a complete rupture and is really just a partial, more of like a type 1 tear. So what do you guys think? Let me know below. Do you think he actually completely ruptured and completely tore his Achilles? Do you think it was likely more just a partial tear? What do you think about the fight? Let me know any questions or comments you have below. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.